This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone. Today's Governance Committee regular meeting of the Hudson River Black River Regulating District is occurring virtually as well as here at the Lewis County Legislative Boardroom in Lowville. Our Sacandaga Field Office in Mayfield and our Hudson River Area Office in Albany, with some board members and staff joining remotely and members of the public able to do so as well. We want to thank our hosts here in Lewis County who will be here from later this morning. The board meeting agenda is available at HRBRRD.ny.gov under board meetings. We ask that you please close other programs on your computer or phone, silence your cell phone, and mute your audio when not speaking. The conference organizer will monitor the program's chat function for public comment. Comments may also be emailed to hrao@hrbrrd.ny.gov. We'll begin this morning's meeting with our governance committee. So I'll hand things over to our committee chairman, Jeffrey Rosenthal. Jeff?
Jeffrey, you're muted.
Jeff, we can't hear you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, guests. We'll start with a roll call, please, or call to order.
Pledge of Allegiance.
Does everybody have a flag, a pledge of allegiance? First, I'm sorry. I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Leslie, would you be kind enough to call the roll?
Yes, committee chair Jeffrey Rosenthal,
Here.
committee member Alfred Candido,
Here.
Alfred Hayes. Here. Board chair Mark Finkel.
Here.
Board member Timothy Reagan.
Here.
And Richard Berg. Here. Executive director John Callahan.
Here.
General counsel Robert Leslie, that's me. Chief fiscal officer Timothy Minuccia.
Here.
Chief engineer Robert Fulton.
Here.
And compliance officer Stephanie Rizicki.
Here.
Committee member Kenneth DeWitt is excused. I believe that's everybody.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leslie. I will entertain a motion to adopt. I know of no revisions needed for the agenda. A motion to adopt the agenda for today's governance committee meeting.
Make that motion.
Second.
Mr.
So
Reagan.
move. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. And the next thing I'll do is entertain a motion for approval of our committee meeting minutes of September 14th.
I'll make that motion.
And a second.
Okay.
Mr. Hayes.
All in favor? Aye. And lastly, Mr. Leslie, I understand there's new business concerning a second amendment to the ground lease and water usage agreement at Stillwater. Mr. Leslie, if you'd be kind enough.
Thank you very much. There is a resolution in your board packet amending the ground lease, originally entered into in 1985 and then amended in 2006, suggested that at the end of the term, the parties would extend the lease through the 31st of this year. Barring an agreement, the regulating district would purchase the plant. We are working to get a fair market value appraisal done and negotiated a 3-month extension with Stillwater Associates to bring the extended term of the agreement out to March 31st of 2022, by which time we hope to have our appraisal done. They will have their appraisal done, and we'll be in a position to negotiate a purchase price for that plant, barring, obviously, an extension of the reservoir operating agreement or the creation of a new reservoir operating agreement for a new term.
Mr. Chairman, can I just add just a couple of thoughts to that?
Certainly, please.
Thank you. So Mr. Leslie and several members of the team here, we've been working with the operator of that facility to try and get a new lease in place. It did become apparent last year that they were not willing to enter into a new lease equal to or greater than their current lease. In other words, they were looking for a significant reduction in their rent, which is, I'm sorry, Tim, 40,000 and change a month.
No, about $6,800 and change per month at
$6,800
Stillwater. Yes.
change per month. So at that point, seeking that lease had continued to escalate. Agreement had continued to escalate at 3% a year.
Right.
We were seeking for at least that to continue. And once it became clear that we would need to go to what the current agreement, which is in its last 5-year extension, is that right?
Yes.
Counselor, would call for, which is the purchase of the improvements at the site. So the plant itself, the real property is state property under the jurisdiction of the regulating district. So again, this is not our deciding we want to buy these improvements of our own volition, but it is what the current agreement prescribes.
That is true.
And so we are going down this road. That doesn't preclude the possibility that if we go far enough down this road, the operators of the plant may come back and say, hold on a minute, we'd like a new agreement after all. But currently, that's not where we're headed. Counselor, anything to add to that?
No.
Just a question on that. The lease that they currently have, any maintenance related work inside of the power plant, is that still all, are they spending the money so it's being well maintained, or are they just, I don't know what's required on one of those types of plants.
We're going to get a good look at it today, certainly. And we can I think Mr. Dick, our superintendent, probably has a few thoughts as well, but our chief engineer that we can maybe incorporate into the tour today.
But if they're not maintaining it, we'll be able to push back and make sure that they're maintaining it the way they need to until the lease runs out.
Well, certainly until this agreement expires, I think, Counselor, it's fair to say that they have 100% responsibility for those improvements which they own.
But that would be a breakdown most likely, or anything, no preventative maintenance or anything like that during that period. I don't know how these things are set up. I don't even know what's required in one of those plants. I have no clue. But I know when somebody's getting out at the end of the lease, that's one of the easiest things to do to help try cost is stop doing that.
I don't have, they're 35 years in, and at this point, they've got 6 months left. Any deferred maintenance that they may have suffered at this point is water past the turbine, so to speak.
And I'm not sure if there are any provisions in there that offer us an ability to enforce repair or compel them to repair either. So, I mean, that I would defer to Rob, but I don't think I've ever seen a portion of the contract that gives us the authority to compel them to make repairs.
They're 100% responsible for the plant. And then they're looking to sell that plant.
Mr. Reagan, I'm not so sure that if at the end of the day, after a purchase by the regulating district and a competitive solicitation for another operator at that site, that subsequent operator would stick with that existing plant. So that would be an open question.
Is that, may I ask a question? Has that plant experienced long-term out of service periods?
It has. There have been maintenance issues and outages that have lasted months.
And I'm not familiar with the lease but the amount of money that they pay to the district, Is that directly related to their production of electricity?
Not at this point.
Fixed amount.
Fixed amount.
So it's fixed amount.
It has escalated over the years by 3% per year. But that is more of a inflationary protection
But
for
if
the
the plant
regulating
was down
district.
for 3 or 4 months, they still continue, they're still obligated. to
Yes.
pay.
Correct.
And has it been, if you were to chart the out of service versus production over
Mhm.
just a recent period of time, because I know they've been there for a long time, over, let's say, the last year or two, is it in production more than out of production, or is it the other way around?
Due to outages, probably has had availability at a greater percentage of the time as a result of it's, or rather, a greater percentage of the time availability when the water is available. So they have not been down due to maintenance issues in the last 12 months, a majority of the time.
Because for us to know if they maintain any schedule of preventive maintenance, that would put a burden on us to do more inspections and to know their operations as intimately as they do.
Right.
So really all we can track is when they break down.
Right.
Right?
Yes, but I think with our staff in the field on a daily basis, plus specifically when we have, or when they have breakdowns or need repairs, I think we have a fairly decent track record and understanding of some of the major maintenance issues of the plant. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Rosenthal?
I think with that in mind, I'll entertain a motion to advance for consideration by the full board the second amendment for the groundwater lease and water usage agreement at Stillwater.
So moved.
And do I have a second?
Hayes?
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I believe that concludes business before the governance committee. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the governance committee.
I will.
Second?
A second that.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. The governance committee is adjourned and we'll move into the regular board meeting, please.
Thank you. Do we keep going? Does she need to reset anything on the
It
table?
does not. Just keep rolling.
I'd like to call to order the October board meeting of the Hudson River Black River Regulating District. Roll call, Mr. Leslie.
Board Chairman Mark Finkel,
Here.
Board Members Albert Hayes,
Here.
Richard Byrd. Here. Alfred Candido.
Here.
Timothy Reagan.
Here.
Executive Director John Callahan.
Here.
General Counsel Robert Leslie, Chief Engineer Robert Fulton.
Here.
Chief Fiscal Officer Timothy Minicha.
Here.
Sorry, Mr. Rosenthal, I took you out of order. You're on video feed.
You forgot me? Here. I'm still here.
Stephanie Rozicki.
Here.
And Second Vice Chair Kenneth DeWitt is excused.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Leslie. Next, we have a welcome by the Lewis County Board Chair Lawrence Dahlhoff and County Manager Ryan Pichetti.
Thank you. It's unusual sitting over on this side. On behalf of Larry Dahlhoff, the chairman, and the Lewis County Board of Legislators, we do have a legislator here with us. Phil Hathaway from Harrisville is with us today, and Ian Gilbert from the town of New Bremen. Our treasurer, Eric Berkler, our county attorney, Joan McNichol, and our planning and community development director, Cassie Buell. So we've got a group that's going to be going with you guys to Stillwater after this for a tour, so that should be fun. But we just wanted to say welcome and thank you for coming to Lewis County. There was a few years where the assessment that had come down from the board became a bit of a sticking point, not just, I know, in Lewis County, but I think a couple of the other counties got a little frustrated as well. I think the effort that you guys have made over the last, 4 or 5 years to get to know us, to come and visit us and do some tours. I think that's made all the difference. We'll see later this afternoon that what you guys are doing up at Stillwater and the work that you do really helps protect our communities. We have a lot of flooding as it is. I can't imagine what the Black River Basin would be like without the series of water control measures that this board regulates. So Lewis County is about 27,000 people over 1,200 square miles. So we're sparsely populated. We're a rural community. I've got a map in my office of the 1925 or 1915 census. And at that time, Lewis County had about 26,000 people. Today, we have about 26,000 people. So we're consistent agricultural community. We've got a budget of about $55 million. We own the county hospital. That's right down the road there. That is owned, operated by the County of Lewis. We're one of only 2 county-owned hospitals in New York State. There's a nursing home there as well. And we're governed by the Lewis County Board of Legislators. And so we're excited to have you guys here. We appreciate the partnership. We appreciate you taking the time to be here. And we're looking forward to learning more about what the authority does here in Lewis County and how you keep us safe. So thanks again. And any of the legislators or elected officials like to say anything?
Well, I want to thank you for having us as well. And it's a pleasure to be here. And we just like working with all our county partners. And you're certainly one. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Next, I need a motion to adapt or revise. Well, we don't need to revise. A motion to adapt our meeting agenda. Somebody?
Mr. Reagan?
I'll make that motion.
Mr.
Second,
Hagan?
Any discussion? All in favor?
aye.
Is there anyone who wants to make a public comment? Okay. Next is approval of our September 14th, 2021 regular board meeting minutes.
So moved.
Mr. Rosenthal?
Is there a second?
Second.
Any
Second.
additional corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, a report of our executive director, Mr. Cal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. See, my report appears on pages 19 and 20. Certainly, during the last reporting period, much of our time was consumed by the transfer of our Hudson River area office from one Albany location to another. I want to thank everybody that worked tirelessly together to make that happen. We had a little working group, Stephanie Rizicki, Gina Bowman, Anna Tracy, certainly the colleagues here around the table, Mr. Minicha, Mr. Leslie, Mr. Fulton, and also Mr. Mosier. Truly a team effort, a lot of moving parts, and I just want to note that move was made successfully, except as I will note here. Gina Bowman, we have one request to pass along as part of my report. After we moved in, the office location is pre-furnished. There are some cubicles that we're responsible for, part of the good deal that we got on the space, and a light came crashing down on her personal phone and destroyed it. In consultation with Mr. Leslie, applicable policy and guidance allows us to reimburse up to $350 if we conclude that damage has been done to personal property through no fault of the employee. Mr. Leslie and I have considered the matter and agreed that is the case. And the replacement cost is $99 and some change. So once we get a receipt from her on the replacement form, I'd like the board, I'd ask Mr. Chairman that the board advance a motion to reimburse up to $100 for the replacement of that personal cell phone.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. Do I hear a motion to?
Sure.
The second?
Second,
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
The only thing I would note, I didn't hear that you had mentioned that Tim had also submitted to our insurance company, who said the deductible was far in excess of the amount.
Thank you, Counselor. That is the case. So we were not able to go that route. The deductible was
$500.
$500.
Okay.
Why we're coming. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I have no other issues to bring before the board and stand by for any questions.
Any questions from Mr. Callahan? Thank you, sir. Next, we go to contracts and actions. First, resolution to approve amendment number 5 to the HDR contract C022012 to perform Stillwater Dam breach analysis, site-specific, probable maximum participation study.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My memorandum is on page 21. It recites the progress we've made in the update of the probable maximum flood study at Stillwater, much of which the first 4 or 5 paragraphs are similar, if not exactly what I presented previously. But in summary, back in 2014, we hired HDR to conduct a design flood and breach analysis at Stillwater Dam. They submitted a report. We reviewed it, submitted that to FERC between 2016 and 2017. Responded or developed an approach in response to comments that FERC sent to us, and that's led us to some supplemental studies, including the site-specific probable maximum precipitation analysis effort, which in May of 2018, we authorized as task 1 as part of HDR's scope of work to determine if a full site-specific probable maximum precip study was warranted. HDR completed the site-specific probable maximum precipitation feasibility study in a report in 2018, which detailed the potential reduction in the PMP based on the site-specific conditions and storm events. The advantage of doing that analysis and moving forward with the next phase of work is to bring down to lower the probable maximum elevation that would occur under the probable maximum storm event at Stillwater. By doing that, we reduce loading on the structures and can hopefully continue to show that the structures safely meet FERC dam safety regulations. And so HDR's findings in their preliminary study indicated the potential of a 20% reduction, 27% reduction in the PMP from the current FERC accepted PMP calculations. And the district staff reviewed HDR's preliminary site-specific probable maximum precipitation feasibility study and determined the potential reduction supported further investigation. Reduction of the PMP provides an opportunity to reduce the design flood. A reduction of the design flood will lead to a lower maximum design flood elevation in the reservoir. And a lower maximum design flood elevation in the reservoir reduces the forces acting on and which are used to determine the stability of the earthen embankment dam, the spillway, the outlet, and the concrete dam at Stillwater. In 2019, HDR conducted additional studies coming out of contract number 4 amendment, which updated several of the calculations used to determine the PMP. These updated calculations produced a 26% reduction in the PMP. And HDR submitted a memorandum in August of 2019 detailing the reduction. And in March of this year, FERC indicated its general acceptance and concurrence with HDR's approach and methods proposed to reduce the PMP. Attached to my memorandum is HDR scope of work for tasks which were not included in the original proposal back in 2012, which includes a more extensive effort to update the PMP and revise the PMP values. As such, the district requested a proposal, and that, as I said, that proposal is attached. Still, staff recommends acceptance of HDR's proposal for probable maximum flood study update. Amendment number 5 seeks board authorization to amend the scope of contract CO2 2012 to include the completion of work defined in tasks 1 through 5 of the proposal, and to increase the total fee of contract C02 2012 by $65,000 to a not to exceed price of $152,250, and authorize the executive director to execute an amendment to the agreement in the amount of $65,000. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? We have a motion to increase the contract.
I will.
I'll second. I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Secondly, resolution to award liquidity management consulting services work to 3+1 Company Incorporated. Mr. Manini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You may recall that the budget adopted by the board anticipates issuance of bonds next fiscal year. The regulating district will be working with a number of firms, including a financial advisor, bond counsel, and underwriter to bring this issue to market. Today, we ask your permission to add one more firm to the team by approving this agreement with 3+1, a Rochester area firm that specializes in helping state and local governments better understand their cash flow. While such understanding is important at all times, it is especially important when preparing to borrow. Borrowing too little means any shortfall would have to be made up from the regulating district's cash and investment holdings. Borrowing too much means incurring needless interest costs over the 30-year life of the bond issue. In addition, a deeper understanding of the regulating district's actual and projected liquidity will demonstrate to credit rating agencies that potential liquidity concerns they might identify have already been identified and addressed by the regulating district. Given the regulating district's limited exposure to rating agencies and municipal bond investors, such a demonstration may result in a more favorable rating and a lower cost of capital. For these reasons, and the warranty that 3+1 provides, we ask the board to approve this resolution. As always, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, what's the difference in the cost of doing that versus the cost of borrowing money at a lower rate? I mean, how much lower are the differences that you could see by a favorable bond rating?
So it's hard to say. We have such little history. The last time the regulating district did a public sale was in the late 1980s. So given the relatively low still rates of interest,
yeah,
we think this might help us, not so much on the rate side, but maybe we get the opportunity to borrow a little bit less. And so in round numbers, for every $1 million that the regulating district may borrow, annual interest and principal cost, debt service cost might be $55,000. That's the working interest rate assumptions that we have from our financial advisor.
So the reality, this isn't for a lower rate. This is to make sure that we're not borrowing too much money.
I think that's where we get greater yield on this kind of investment. If we could just reduce that borrowing amount by $100,000, 1/10 of a million, now that $55,000 of interest cost would be shaved by $5,500. In 2 years, we would have more than
We'd have a
yielded.
payback. We'd have a payback
Okay,
of what we're paying for.
Correct.
Yes.
Any other questions? Is there,
Do we have bond ratings now?
We do not, because we don't have any
History.
debt that we have sold publicly. The only debt that we have outstanding is via a financing arrangement that we have with the New York State Environmental Facilities Corporation.
So when you go out on the bond market, being a municipality, an entity that doesn't have a bond rating,
Yes.
we pay the highest interest? Or
We do.
is it, but it's still competitive?
So-
We're gonna throw our bonds out for bid, so to speak, with one of the companies that
We're hoping-
secure.
We believe that instead of a competitive sale, we expect, like most borrowers these days, to enter into a negotiation with an underwriter. And we can't say today what that interest cost is going to be. We don't have a rating, we don't have history, so we are going to be new in many respects to the municipal bond marketplace. And for all those reasons, we think having a even deeper understanding of our liquidity needs, cash flow needs, makes sense given the cost of the service and the warranty that they provide to us.
We have to assure a borrower, or we assure somebody who's willing to lend us money that we have our Ps and Qs set up.
Which we shall.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Is there a price to this resolution?
$9,000, up to $9,900.
Any other questions or comments? If not, I'll entertain a resolution to award the liquidity management consulting services to 3+1 Company.
So moved.
Second,
I'll second it.
any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Staff committee
you.
reports, governance committee, Mr. Rosenthal.
Mr. Chair, I believe Mr. Leslie can advise, and we've already discussed in the governance committee, a motion with regard to Stillwater. And I'll ask Mr. Leslie to just go forward again with that.
Sure.
It's pretty quick.
The original resolution is on page 5 of the board packet. This is the second amendment to the ground lease and water usage agreement at Stillwater. Basically, the first term, or the extended term at this point, is to expire on December 31st of 2021. This agreement, this amendment would extend the agreement by 3 months to March 31st, during which time we hope to get an appraiser and come up with a final figure for the plant's appraised value. There are a couple other minor amendments with regard to our address. In all other respects, the existing ground lease and water usage agreement would remain in effect.
Thank you, Mr. Leslie.
Clarification, Counselor, I think, was this version, I think, reflects the updated document.
It does.
Okay, need a resolution to approve the second amendment of the ground lease and water usage agreement in Stillwater.
So moved.
Second,
Very well.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. The staff reports, general counsel, Mr. Leslie.
All right, so now I look forward, I have to flip back to find, my report is on page 39. First thing had to do with Conklinville. We worked with DEC and OGS to enter into an agreement, which agreement has been executed, whereby the regulating district will submit any invoices that, actually, OGS will submit any invoices that they see to DEC, who will check with us. We will process the invoice or approve the invoice. DEC will then process and pay said invoice. currently working on a non-disclosure agreement with council for Erie Boulevard, whereby once that's executed, Erie should be able to release additional documentation to Walden, our contractor, as they determine the value of the 56 feet of head at Conklinville. Did some research for the executive director and the mayor of Mayfield regarding the ownership of the dam at Mayfield and responsibility for the maintenance of the highway that goes across that dam. We also, as you just passed the resolution, have been working on resolving issues with regard to the ground lease and water usage agreement at Stillwater. Other than that, as the executive director indicated, I participated in the move to the new office. We had a single FOIA request during the reporting period, which we were able to address on time. Any other questions?
Any questions through
Just
council?
one, council, I'm always curious, of course, when I see something related to dock permits. One of your items, research the effect on an access permit, water rights, dock permit to an association. Is that on Great Sacandaga?
Yeah, there was an association up by the golf course just south of the Sport Island Pub. There's a condo association that has 430 feet of lakefront,
Mm-hmm.
or permit of 430 feet. The actual lakefront in front of their property is like 621 feet, most of which is landlocked and sits between their parcel and parcels to the south. In the southwestern corner of their parcel, there is a claim by an adjoining landowner for adverse possession, and the association wanted to know what impact that claim would have upon their access permit, specifically their dock or their dock system.
Oh, my gosh.
I was able to discern for them that the 430 feet of permit width is up to the north, and the southern area that's at issue would not be affected in the event that the adjoining landowner won their adverse possession claim.
Fair enough.
And ultimately, it wouldn't affect the dock.
Any other questions or comments?
Fair enough.
I
Thank
didn't
you.
mean to make you sorry you asked.
Thank you, Counselor.
Compliance officer, Mr. Zicki.
Good morning and thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report is on page 40 and highlights my activity during the reporting period. Majority of my time was spent transitioning to the new phone system. I worked with Mitel 8x8 and Mr. Medica during that time. All MWBE and SDBOD reports have been submitted. And I am working with IMC, our permit database consultant, in preparation of the upcoming renewal season. Finally, on pages 41 through 43, you will find the contract status updates. They are there for your review and satisfy the public authority requirement. Do you have any questions? If not, that completes my report.
Any questions? Thank you. Next, Chief Fiscal Officer, Mr. Medica.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The CFO report can be found on page 44 of your packet. In addition to the results for the first quarter, which show a strengthening cash position and encouraging early signs from a budgetary perspective. The most noteworthy development since the September board meeting is the completion of the independent audit for the fiscal year that ended on June 30th, 2021. I don't want to say too much about this because you're going to have a chance to hear from and ask questions of the lead partner from our auditing firm, Nora Galeros, at an audit committee meeting on November 9th. If you want to get a head start, though, you can find the audited financial statements on the regulating district's reports, policies, and procedures page entitled Independent Audit Report, fiscal year ending June 30, 2021. As I mentioned in my summary, the audit opinion from Galeros Robinson is clean. And while the bottom line was a loss for the fiscal year, you may recall that the regulating district was projected to suffer a loss in the budget adopted by the board back in June of 2018. The main difference between the loss budgeted 3 years ago and the actual loss last year is that the budget did not include expenses for depreciation or other post-employment benefits. Those are not budgeted because it is an accepted practice that a state or local government only budget what it intends to take in and spend in cash during a fiscal year. Depreciation and other post-employment benefits are largely non-cash expenses. If the combined $1.5 million for depreciation and other post-employment benefits had been included in the budget adopted 3 years ago, the regulating district would have projected to lose nearly $2.3 million, much greater than the $775,000 it actually lost last year. So if all this whets your appetite, just wait until we take this up in greater detail with Nora on November 9. If, however, you have a question that cannot wait, of course, I will do my best to answer it.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Chief Engineer, Mr. Bolton.
I just had one question on disbursements for the month.
Okay.
And I looked at those school taxes. What property, what is that all for? Is that just for where the
I think
building sits?
about 1.1 million.
It's, I didn't add it up, but I looked at it. It's,
So we paid in September more than 1.9 million in school taxes, 99 and change % of which are in the a half a dozen school districts in Fulton and or Saratoga County.
Yeah.
The balance paid to a couple of districts in the Black River area. And so the regulating district is.
but is that just for the
Well,
dam?
let me answer this question. So think of it this way. When we built the dam,
Yeah.
there were a number of properties owned by private landowners.
Mhm.
Those landowners paid property taxes.
Mhm.
And they paid school taxes.
Yeah.
We built the dam and the state bought the lands.
Yeah.
And we have jurisdiction over those lands. By statute, we had to basically make whole those taxing entities that no longer were able to collect
At that
taxes
time, because the
from
taxes are-
from the private landowner.
Yeah.
So the district has been compelled for years and years,
Yeah.
for the last 90 years, to pay the taxes underlying, or pay the taxes on all the lands underlying the regulating district's reservoir. That includes the dam, the middle of the lake, each of the adjacent areas. We have a legislative proposal, which we're trying to get floated up through, that would shift that property tax burden from the beneficiaries of the regulating district to the state.
In other words, treat it like other
Treat it
state
like
lands that
other-
are taxable for one reason or another.
Right.
State currently pays about 290 million annually in local
people-
property taxes.
Correct.
So I
people
probably got
who
it
are-
right.
Right, yeah. People are familiar with the forest preserve lands. It's the same argument. Where,
But I understand that, it makes sense when you build it, that you've got to make people whole because that land's now gone because of what they did. So I understand that.
Yep.
But since then, there's been a number of houses and cottages and things that are probably a heck of a lot higher tax liability or higher tax record than what was ever there before
Well,
that are being paid.
but the cottages are on private lands outside of the regulating district's lands.
Yep, but there's still, the value of them's gone up because of what the lake being there. I mean, that's what's driven the value up and the assessment up, which should come back to them. So it seems to me that I understand trying to make them whole to begin with, but then there seems there ought to be a way that that's kind of peeled back over time, over 100 years.
And we agree. We are trying to peel back that obligation by enacting legislation which shifts that burden. The obligation to pay those taxes is at the Environmental Conservation Law, Article 15, Title 21, 2113, the last 2115, one of those. That obligation is in statute, in our enabling statute. Absent a change in that statute, we have to continue to pay those taxes.
It's just a lot. I just was surprised.
Can I make this point?
So just to further complete the picture, that's not the last real property tax payment that we will make in our fiscal year. There's another 1.3 million roughly coming our way for county, town, and other local government taxes, which we'll make mostly in January. So total of roughly $3.3 million, which is the largest single category of expense that the regulating district faces, higher even than our total compensation.
And as you see the Black River area and the Hudson River area, this is a Hudson River area problem. There is a similar problem in the Black River area, but the numbers are very much smaller. There are properties upon which we pay taxes. So the change that we hope to get enacted will also benefit Lewis County and the other counties in the Black River area.
Tim, this 3-year budget cycle compared to the last, the local property taxes will pay up 1.5 million or so compared to the last 3-year period.
I'm sorry, can you say your question again?
This 3-year budget cycle that we're in now, we will pay, I recall the number being about 1.5 million more in local property taxes as compared to the last 3 years.
Right.
I think that's in the ballpark.
It's basically a rising tide raises all boats kind of issue. The taxes were X in 1930. And the escalation in those taxes have kept our portion of the taxes paid in each of those municipalities or school districts similar to the amounts paid by others outside of the district.
And because you're a state agency, you don't have any ability to go back like a private business would to hire a group to come in and sue
we don't have the ability to go in and do a tax search case the way that a private entity would be able to do. We, for years, decades, these taxes were considered an expense of the district, and those expenses were foisted upon the revenue generating hydropower companies that were downstream of our major impoundments. Conklinville is the key example. All of the FERC licensed hydropowers downstream of Conklinville paid their portion of our expenses that we determined was their responsibility under the initial apportionment of costs in 1925. In 2008, a ruling of the U.S. District Court for the Court of Appeals determined that under the Federal Power Act, the federal government, the federal lawsuit, or the federal statute preempted the state statutes imposition of those taxes on those downstream hydros. So we were no longer able to foist that. At that point, it was about $3 million of our $5 million Hudson River area budget. We were no longer able to foist those expenses on those downstream hydros. That created a need for us to do a new apportionment, which we did. We completed it in 2013, 5 very dark years for the regulating district. And at the same time, the Federal Power Act provides a mechanism through which those FERC licensed hydropowers have to pay a portion of our expenses. But the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission determined, and the courts agreed, that real estate taxes are not among those expenses we are allowed to impose on those downstream hydros. So we're left with a state statute that is largely preempted, a federal court decision that led to a headwater benefits determination, and a determination of the regulatory agency that taxes could not be included in that headwater benefits determination, which then left us with a state statute that requires us to pay taxes, but does not allow us to determine that those taxes should be paid by the companies that are actually making the money from the district's impoundments. So the long and short of it is, in 2008, the world changed, and we are still trying to get a change in legislation which will address this imbalance.
How's the assessed value determined?
Basically think of it rising tide of all boats. The assessed value in the whole town went up. Our percentage of that remains the same. That's how they determined.
So they created one huge parcel on a tax map. Basically, this became the area that was not a lake, and now it's a lake. And all the individual parcels that were purchased all became one tax map parcel.
Yeah, well,
And they set a value on that parcel.
there are individual parcels, but they're all treated, as one big.
Well, where we have the dams and we have controls and we own property that has, but so those are all individual parcels.
There's a whole set of track maps, and somebody from Equalization and Assessment, I think, works with Tim to make sure that we've got the right
State
bills.
tax
Correct.
determines that.
Yes.
I'm just curious because that's all done by local assessors.
Mhm.
Yeah.
If you're a local, like, how do you put a value on a dam?
Well, you're not putting a value on the dam, and the problem is, all right, say you're the town of X, and you've got 5 of our parcels, and you look at it and you say, oh, this is ridiculous. They should be charged more than they, so they would periodically up the assessment on the state's lands. We relied, or we continue to rely on Equalization and Assessment, the state agency, to go back and say, no,
Okay.
your ability to charge the regulating district is based on their percentage of the total assessment of the town's lands, and your percentage by raising the regulating district's responsibility by $100,000 per parcel, you've now thrown off the formula. Your total assessment is now higher than it should be by the amount that you raise the regulating district assessment. They either reduce our assessment back down, and then we pay the bill.
But if I understood it right, and I don't understand this at all, so, but what I thought you said.
This is a graduate level course.
Yeah, I'm sure, and I'm way below that. So, but it sounded like that back when the reservoir was made, there's an agreement to make everybody whole, which all makes sense. That makes complete sense to me. And okay, so now this is what you're gonna be taxed because you took over the farmland, you took over all the taxable thing that was where the lake is. But since then, has there been a reassessment of the value of the land? Because it sounds like what I understood is every time the tax rate went up, that was automatically just passed on to us and it continued to go up with never a reassessment of what the true value of the land is.
The value of our lands was established in 1925.
Yep, got that.
And at that time, they also determined what the total value of all the lands in that town were. Our land took a certain percentage, say 12.3815%, and the rest of the lands in the town had the balance of the value. As the various other lands have been reassessed, the total value of the assessment in the town has increased. It increases every year. Maybe in 1988, it increased 3%. 1989, it increased 1%. 1990, it increased 2.8%. It keeps going up. As it goes up, the Board of Equalization and Assessment would increase the value of the state's lands under the regulating district's jurisdiction by that same percentage. So our level kept going up as the rest of the town went up.
Is it fair to say that our share has not changed?
Our share has not changed.
Our percentage share. So the state taxation department puts a lid on local assessors who might want to have the regulating district pay 90% of the whole town levy.
Yes.
So I get that. It's a regulatory, it's based on statute.
Yep.
So the local assessors have no jurisdiction over setting assessed value of the district's lands.
Right.
Or state lands.
Right.
That were within that jurisdiction.
And Equalization Assessment is familiar with this because they've been doing it for us for years, but they also do it with all the state lands underlying that are in a park.
They also do it for all of your municipalities within every county.
Right.
They come in and make it equal.
Yep.
But I get it now. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Very interesting.
Chief Engineer, Mr. Poltan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report begins on page 67. September gave us a bit of a break from July and August. Unusual heavy precip. We had in the Hudson River area between 86 and 136% of historic average precip for September. And in the Black River area, we saw average of about 72% of historic average across Stillwater, Old Forge, and Six Lake. As a result, we had about 150% of historic average and 114% of historic average inflow to Great Sacandaga Lake and Indian Lake, respectively, and about 94% of historic average inflow at Stillwater Reservoir. I think the graphs would be my page 7 of the report, 73 or 74. I think that speaks for itself. The excessive rainfall that we had in July and August, and our ability to bring the reservoirs back down. We're now Great Sacandaga Lake is tracking along the target elevation. Indian Lake slightly below our historic average elevation. Stillwater Reservoir is back very close to, actually, as of this week will be on target. And Sick Lake and Old Forge, as they usually are a little bit more easily maintained. We did have, you can see in those graphs, we did have some unusual increase in elevation of those reservoirs back in September as a result of, or excuse me, August as a result of the heavy rains. But we're back on target, and actually we'll begin drawing down Sixth Lake and Old Forge beginning this Thursday as we begin releases for the Moose River Festival that occurs this weekend and the rafting events that go on downstream in the Moose. And that typically is the now the commencing of our drawdown of the Fulton chain of lakes coincides with those releases that we make for the rafters. So I think we're in pretty good position. Certainly you track along our target for each of the reservoirs as we prepare to draw down the rest of the fall and into winter in preparation for spring of 2022. Okay, happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Great report, thank you. You would like to, you have a comment?
Now, I'll just note, relative to the tour and with our colleagues, Mike Dickov and Kim Scott here, the phrase, never in the course of human history has so much been owed by so many to so few. They and their colleagues, Megan Cole and Tim Harwood, do a great job in the Black River area, helping keep residents safe. We're looking forward to those that can make it afterwards to show them a little bit about what they do. So just want to thank and acknowledge our colleagues here. We don't, especially lately in the COVID era, get out here that much, but hopefully this afternoon will be an opportunity to showcase some of their great work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'd add that while board members are invited to attend, this is not going to be an extension of the board meeting. No board action will take place.
That's correct. Any other board member questions or comments? Well, lastly, a resolution for the next board meeting, 11/9 at 10 o'clock in the morning at the Sacandaga Field office. Need a motion to that effect? Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion for adjournment?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.